Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. I just wanted to kind of talk a little bit about something I've seen in the news a lot lately, and that's that Google is a monopoly. Um, Many news outlets have covered this because I think there's a claim against Google right now that could result in some people getting um, payment for like incognito mode in Chrome not fully protecting their privacy or whatever it is. And I think that's great. You know, if Google's not accurately representing the functionality of incognito mode, I think that people should have to, or that Google should have to, um, you know, repay anyone who suffered damages because of that. Um, but today I just wanted to focus on answering the question of whether or not Google is a monopoly. First of all, I don't think Google can really be considered a monopoly through the typical way that the legal system defines a monopoly. In the past, legal rulings have just determined if a company is a monopoly or not, if they're able to manipulate prices. And I don't think Google's able to totally control how much people pay for its products or whatever it may be. But I think that Google does have an insanely high level of influence that's very typical of monopolistic companies. And the way that Google's done this is they've developed a huge user base on their search engine. And then they use information from that to feed into all their other lines of business and also to grow their data collection, basically. But I think the place that Google kind of oversteps the line as far as monopoly goes is the digital advertising space. So if 99% of people are using Google ad or Google search engine, that means that any company that wants to reach those people on the search engine has to do so through Google ads. So Google controls 99% of the search market. So that means Google controls 99% of the eyes that would see those ads that people buy on their page. That does allow Google to charge more for its ads than, say, something like Yahoo or Bing, which still has a large user base, but it's just minuscule compared to that of Google's. So I don't really have I think maybe a solution would be to break up, kind of decentralizing Google's functions. So I don't know how that would work structurally, but I think just kind of limiting the power that Google has would be beneficial overall. And then another thing that comes to mind is kind of Google's control of the internet, even if they're not, price gouging on like an ISP can to charge you $150 a month or whatever for your internet service. But Google does offer Google Fiber, which is an ISP, which gives people the ability to connect to websites and to connect to the internet. And then after they've connected through that ISP, most likely they'll probably use Google Chrome as their browser, as Google Chrome controls the browser market share as well. And after they've connected through Google Fiber and to Google Chrome, they'll probably use Google Search to access information on the internet. And then they may want to click on a news site and the site has Google Analytics on it, or is an Google AMP page where Google actually serves the page and you're not even going to CNN or wherever it is. So to me, that's concerning because if I pay for Google's internet service, I use Google's browser, I use Google's search engine, and then Google's tracking me on all the websites I go to advertise to me on those sites, then I feel like I'm not given the opportunity to kind of get objective information to verify that Google's not tampering with those results. So let's say Google is contributing to a certain political party, which I don't think this is the case. I don't think Google has an inherent bias in their search engine. I think it's mostly just kind of put in there based on what each person's specific browsing habits are. So Google, like my experience with Google might be biased, but it's just because of what I've done on Google in the past. It's not anything that I think Google's trying to push on people. However, if Google decided that they didn't like a certain political candidate, or a certain business didn't align with their company values or their interest in making a profit, Google could decide to basically censor those things. And since Google controls the majority of the browser market, the majority of the search market, if Google just decides to turn off that site and so people can't find it on the search engine, people, maybe Chrome just happens to crash whenever I try to go to that website, well, that means Google has a ton of power to potentially influence what information I can find, what sources of news I can read, who I'm able to follow on the internet. So that's the concerning part for me, not some, way that Google's pushing an agenda, or some way that, Google's tracking me and collecting my data, because a lot of that is done in ways that benefits me. And even though, privacy advocates typically disagree that tracking my location and tracking my search history and all that stuff is good, Google gives me some conveniences in exchange for that. So I'm less worried about that and more concerned about Google controlling my internet experience from the top down. So Google Fiber, Google Chrome, Android, if I have an Android device, Google Search, and then all of Google's other tools like Gmail. That's another interesting thing, is Google's ability to use Gmail to both understand what I'm interested in and who I'm communicating with. But the other thing is filtering certain messages using the spam folder. People might not think of that as a way that Google's influencing me, but if Donald Trump sends me an email and Google decides that they don't like Donald Trump, they could just move Donald Trump's message to the spam folder and I'd never see it. And this might seem like a minor inconvenience, but consider the fact that Google could do this with any topic or any person trying to contact me. I just think Google has a lot more power than people understand. And that goes beyond just Gmail. That goes beyond Google search and the results I see. That also goes into the ads I see on different websites. If Google deems that a website shouldn't be able to advertise, well, then they're kind of screwed. They're not going to be able to advertise on Google's website or sites using Google Ads. So those companies aren't going to be able to get their message out there, or those organizations aren't going to be able to promote themselves because Google decides that they're not worthy of doing so. And then another way is like on Android or the Chrome extension web store. If I want to install an app on either my Android device or a Chrome extension, that extension or that app has to go through an approval process with Google. But if Google decides that whoever's creating that app is, not worthy of publishing in the store, or that app is malicious as far as Google sees it, then they can just decide to remove that app from the store, or to not allow me to even publish an app in the store. So this allows Google to not price gap. It doesn't allow Google to manipulate market pricing, but it just allows Google to control the flow of information. So in the ways that monopolies have been determined in the past, in cases like railroad industries and oil industries and medical pharmaceutical companies and stuff, it all comes down to whether or not that company has the ability to raise prices super high. But the thing about internet companies is many of them don't charge consumers specifically. They're charging other businesses to advertise to the people on their platforms. And Facebook and Google and Amazon are kind of all in the same group of companies, that they don't really set prices, although they can, and they can change prices on different, like advertising on their platforms or, whatever it may be. Price gouging isn't the issue here. It's not changing pricing and manipulating how much people have to pay to use Google and other services. It's just the fact that these companies control the flow of information to billions of people. And just one little change in that could totally skew the population's opinion on a given topic, especially if they're not given the opportunity to see the full range of information. So yes, I think Google's a monopoly, but it's not in the traditional way. They have a monopoly over information and access to information. And I think that's what needs to be regulated, and that's what needs to be changed. So I don't know how that's going to be done. And there's a lot of people out there that are way smarter than me with probably better opinions on that. But it's concerning because senators and lawmakers are going to have a hard time making those decisions because one, Google makes a ton of money and has a lot of money to influence those people, but then explaining how their tools work to non-technical people who are 80 years old in the Senate or whatever, that's just not going to end up with good results. So I think the best way is for Google to realize the responsibility they have and to move forward responsibly and embrace that responsibility rather than just ignoring it and putting profits first. So that's what I think. And let me know what you think in the comments. If you made it this far, subscribe to my channel. I'll make a lot more videos like this. Thanks for watching, and I hope you all have a good day.